It started with the kind of signal you didn't answer unless you had a death wish, a malfunctioning conscience, or the exact kind of empty calendar Jake Mercer was carrying. The Virelian Dead Zone wasn't just a poetic name. It was a place where good ships went to get atomized, lost, or eaten by space warp anomalies that looked like jellyfish and sounded like your worst ex. Nothing good came out of that place. Nothing living ever called for help from there. So naturally, Jake angled his rust bucket of a ship, the Last Chance, named less as a metaphor and more as a threat, toward the coordinates. The distress signal blinked in soft, regular pulses. Ancient formatting, coded in pre-collapse binary, the kind of thing that hadn't been used since galactic governments still tried to agree on lunch. Something about it scratched at his curiosity, like a song you half remembered from childhood but couldn't name. He tuned into the signal again, heard the faint chime, and said aloud to himself, "If I die out here, I swear I'm blaming boredom." The Last Chance groaned as it turned. She wasn't built for fancy maneuvers. Hell, she wasn't even built for space. Her original function had been atmospheric cargo hauling back on Europa's moon colonies. Jake had retrofitted her over the course of 4 years, some duct tape, and what he strongly suspected was illegal AI code. He called her she out of habit, even though her onboard system referred to itself in a tone of voice that suggested passive-aggressive retirement. "Proximity warning," said the ship's AI Marnie in her usual sighing tone. "You're drifting into the Virelian perimeter, which, if I may be honest, is a terrible idea." "Noted," Jake muttered, thumbing switches. "Also," Marnie added, "you owe me 3 months of maintenance updates, 2 coolant filter cleanings, and approximately 1 good reason not to shut everything down in protest." He patted the console. "You're the only one who talks to me, Marnie. Don't give up on me now." Through the windshield, the black tangle of the dead zone loomed closer. Dead satellites, broken trade vessels, long-dead orbital habitats, all spinning in the silence like grave markers in the void. And there, like a jewel caught in a spider's web, 2 ships hovered in a delicate collision. They looked half-fused together, one long and narrow like a blade of obsidian, the other with curving, petal-like wings. Both were beautiful, utterly alien, and definitely powered down. Life signs flickered weakly. Jake's instincts screamed trap. His wallet screamed possible salvage rights. And a smaller voice whispered, "What if someone's actually alive?" "Fine," he grumbled, setting course. "But if space pirates jump me, I'm throwing the coffee machine at them and screaming." He locked onto the first ship with the grav clamp, carefully nudging the Last Chance into docking position. The interface was unfamiliar. Every console was etched in looping sigils that glowed faintly when he approached. A proximity aura, maybe. He tapped the panel. Nothing. He tapped it again. A small jolt hit his fingertips, and the door hissed open like it was annoyed with him. Inside, the air was thin, cool, and smelled like ozone and lavender. He wasn't sure which part of that should concern him more. The corridors were dark, lined with smooth organic architecture, walls that seemed to pulse faintly like lungs at rest. He found the bridge by instinct more than navigation. It felt like being in the belly of something beautiful and half asleep. And there they were, 2 figures curled into medical alcoves that shimmered with failing stasis fields. Female, humanoid, pale-skinned. Long jet-black hair spilled like ink around their faces. Their ears, elongated, curved gently back from the temples, marked them as unmistakably not human. Elegant, yes, unmistakably alien. Even in stasis they seemed regal. One of them had a long, thin scar along her jaw, almost decorative. The other's hands were folded across her chest, holding what looked like a metal feather. Jake blinked. "Well, that's new." He tapped his comm. "Marnie, I've got 2 passengers. Alive, barely. Also maybe royalty or space ballet dancers, not sure." Marnie's reply came fast. "Don't bring them aboard. They could be contagious, cursed, or worse, entitled. I'm not leaving them here." "You're going to regret this," she said with robotic fondness. Getting them to the last chance was a slow dance of anti-grav sleds, careful adjustments, and a lot of muttering. He arranged them in the infirmary, a glorified cargo bay with one real bed, a lot of straps, and a suspicious smell of mint that never quite left. He hooked their stasis rigs into his auxiliary power and watched their vitals stabilize, if barely. Jake slumped into the pilot's seat, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching stars drift by. Rescue 2 space princesses from a haunted part of space. That's a new one. Maybe they'll wake up, be grateful, and offer me an asteroid made of gold. Or a coupon. I'd take a coupon. Marnie snorted, or maybe the air system did, hard to say. When the first one woke up, it was silent. No gasp, no scream, just eyes opening like glass slowly unfogging. Her gaze locked onto Jake like she was trying to identify whether he was a person or a particularly ugly table. "Hello," he said, holding up his hands. "Human Jake, rescuer, enthusiastic amateur pilot." She sat up gracefully, annoyingly gracefully. She looked around, frowning. "This vessel smells like anxiety." The second sister groaned awake with a yawn. "You always notice the weirdest things first, Caliph." "I notice everything first, Siluna." Jake blinked. "You're both speaking common galactic." Caliph tilted her head, long ears twitching slightly. "You are broadcasting language form patterns at us through your neural field. We are translating them." Jake looked to Marnie. "Am I doing that?" "Yes," Marnie replied, "by accident. Also, one of them just hacked me with a blink." Caliph turned back to him, expression cool and unreadable. "You saved us." "Yeah," Jake said. "I do that sometimes, usually by mistake." Siluna grinned. "You're strange, I like you." Caliph nodded once. "Then we must offer him the proposal." Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "Proposal? Can we maybe do introductions first, or maybe a snack?" Siluna leaned forward, smiling like trouble. "You did a great thing. And where we come from, that comes with consequences." Jake stared, "Good or bad?" Caliph smiled just slightly. "Depends on whether you say yes." Jake stared at them, as though they just asked him to marry a solar flare. Which, given the current trajectory of the conversation, didn't feel entirely off the table. "The proposal," he repeated, setting down his mug like it might explode. Capital P. "Yes," Caliph said simply. She had the composure of someone who could disassemble a planetary government with a few choice words and still make it to afternoon tea. "You have saved us. By the rights of Linareth, that binds us in reciprocity. As the rescued, we are obligated to make an offer." Siluna leaned back in the medbay cot, boots propped on a crate of medical bandages. "It's tradition. Also, it's a little bit ceremonial. Also, it's slightly political. Also," she smirked at Caliph, "it's probably going to make your tiny brain overheat, so let's ease into it." "I'm not tiny," Jake said reflexively, and immediately regretted his word choice. Caliph arched an eyebrow. Jake coughed. "What I mean is, I don't think I'm qualified for whatever this is. I haul broken cargo and get yelled at by my own ship." "I yell because I care," Marnie chimed in helpfully from the intercom. Caliph stepped closer, her long coat of iridescent fiber trailing like mist behind her. She studied Jake, her violet eyes narrowed. "Your qualifications are irrelevant. You acted selflessly in a place most would flee. You rerouted your ship's failing power to keep us alive. You even attempted rudimentary repairs to our life support architecture despite being functionally illiterate in core design tech." Jake blinked. "That wasn't a repair. That was duct tape and prayer." Caliph didn't blink. "It worked." Siluna rolled off the cot and stretched like a cat in low gravity. "Look, Jake, buddy, Star Wanderer, this is a good thing. You're being offered a spot in our house. We're not just space princesses. We're starborn heirs. And you, if you accept, would become our companion soul." Jake opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again just long enough to say, "Is that like a pet?" Caliph looked mildly offended. Siluna cackled. "Only on ceremonial weekends." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Okay, I'm going to need, like, a lot more information. What does being a companion soul mean? Are we talking spiritual bonding? Do I have to give up my ship, my freedom, my limited but beloved supply of instant noodles? Siluna perched herself on a nearby diagnostics console and swung her legs. You wouldn't be giving up anything, you'd gain something. A position, a voice, access to our fleets, our political influence, us. And there are snacks, she added. Fancy ones, not freeze-dried sadness pucks. Marnie beeped twice. For the record, those are high-protein sadness pucks. Jake paced the narrow medbay, stepping over a dangling power cable. This feels fast. Do people normally make lifelong commitments 2 hours after being pulled out of exploding ships? In our culture, Caliph said, yes. Jake paused. And how often does it go terribly wrong? Siluna grinned. Only when we pick the wrong person, so try not to be wrong. He sighed. Do I have time to think about it? Caliph nodded once. Until we reach the next orbital station. Which is where? Half a day away. Jake froze. Half a day. Siluna patted his shoulder. It used to be 2 days, but Caliph reprogrammed your navigation system while you were making coffee. I liked my navigation system, Jake muttered. It was poorly calibrated, Caliph said flatly. It had personality. It was mapping your route via celebrity astrology charts. Jake pointed a finger. That's not entirely inaccurate. Siluna leaned closer. Look, I get it. You're a solo flyer, free spirit, no commitments, emotionally constipated. I am not. And suddenly, you're being offered a lifetime of cosmic intrigue, galactic status, and 2 long-eared women who could throw you across the room if they wanted. That's not the part that's bothering me, Jake muttered. Then what is? He hesitated. What if I say yes and mess it all up? Caliph's voice softened. Then we adapt. Bonds are not about perfection, they're about intent. Jake sat down heavily in his pilot's chair, which let out a metallic creak that sounded suspiciously judgmental. He looked at the sisters, one poised and still as starlight, the other lounging like she was born in mischief. So what now? He asked. You 2 hang out in my ship until I decide whether to accept an interstellar soul bond proposal. Caliph nodded. Correct. Siluna grinned. Also, we're taking over your kitchen. Jake blinked. You cooked. Obviously. You were eating compressed cubes shaped like dinosaurs. I'm 90% sure one of them bit me back. I liked those dinosaurs. Not anymore, you don't. Jake looked to Marnie. Am I still the captain? Legally. Yes, Marnie said. Practically. You lost authority the moment they hotwired my interface and made me play opera during breakfast. You sang opera. I'm multi-talented, Marnie replied primly. Caliph moved to stand beside the viewport, her gaze drifting over the stars. We should prepare. The station at Juno's edge will have sensors that detect our presence, and our enemies may be watching. Enemies? Jake asked. Why is there always a catch? Because, Siluna said cheerfully, you rescued 2 galactic heirs in a war-torn sector. That's like picking up royal cats in a hurricane. Someone's gonna be mad. Royal cats. Fierce, finicky. Prone to clawing when upset. Jake stood up, rubbing his temples. Right, fine, enemies, political drama, food upgrades, possible soul bonding. I'll just add that to the to-do list. Caliph glanced at him. Are you frightened? He considered it. Honestly, no. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to store all this drama. My ship only has 4 closets. Siluna tossed him a piece of something that smelled vaguely spiced and delicious. Here, try the food. Say yes later. Or don't, but if you die before answering, we'll be very put out. Jake bit into the food, chewed, and blinked. This is really good. Siluna winked. Welcome to life beyond freeze-dried misery. Caliph's voice was soft behind him. And perhaps, welcome to the life you never knew you wanted. Jake stared at the stars, the food halfway to his mouth again, and wondered, just for a moment, if his quiet life had just gone supernova. Jake woke up to the soothing sound of diplomatic opera blaring at full volume. For a brief, glorious second, he thought he was being hunted by an opera-singing assassin drone. Then he remembered nope, just Tuesday on the last chance now. Volume down. He croaked. Marnie, ever literal, reduced the volume by 3%. The soprano now sounded slightly more polite in her attempt to shatter his skull. Jake stumbled into the common room, wearing one sock, a shirt that might have been clean last week, and the expression of a man who suspected breakfast might include existential crisis. Again. Siluna was upside down on the ceiling. He stared at her, she waved. Anti-grav yoga want in. I want coffee, he said, and a world where anti-grav yoga doesn't exist. You're very culturally limited. You're very upside down. Kalith entered behind him, robes perfectly pressed, hair perfectly coiled, as if she'd emerged fully formed from a galactic fashion magazine. We have a situation, she said without preamble. Jake groaned and dropped into a chair. Of course we do. We've gone 23 hours without being murdered. It was starting to feel suspicious. Kalith activated the holo display. A galactic map flickered into view, centering on a blinking icon labeled Juno's Edge Orbital Station Echelon 5. Next to it, a red triangle labeled Unverified Hostile Presence. Great, Jake muttered. Nothing says welcome like a hostile triangle. Kalith ignored him. We're approaching Juno's Edge. The station is neutral territory under the compact of 9 systems, but our presence may invite attention. You mean because you're technically dead royalty who vanished in enemy space, and now you're showing up with a human chauffeur in a flying lunchbox? Correct, Kalith said. Still rude, Siluna added, now floating sideways with perfect grace. Jake folded his arms. So what exactly do you need me to do here? Kalith turned to him, expression unreadable. You must pretend to be a dignitary of House Linareth. He snorted. You want me to pretend to be important? I can barely pretend to be awake. You already are important, she said, deadly serious. You're the only one not bound by our laws. That makes you useful. Well, that's not ominous at all. Marnie chimed in over the intercom. I've generated a simulation of the station's welcome protocols. Shall I begin vocal coaching? Jake blinked. Vocal what? The ship suddenly filled with the sound of an official greeting, a deeply melodious voice droning. By the stars and the flame of eternal synthesis, I greet thee with fervor and the unblinking gaze of the cosmos. Nope, Jake said, waving it off. Not doing that. Not greeting anyone with my unblinking gaze. You'll do fine, Siluna said, still floating. Just act mysterious and don't eat anything that tries to taste you first. Why would food taste me? Kalith didn't answer. Jake wasn't sure if that meant she didn't know or didn't want to scare him. When they finally docked, the station looked like a silver dandelion, spokes and spheres spinning around a glowing core. Docking clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk, and Jake braced himself for the worst. He checked his hair, regretted checking it, and stepped out behind the sisters, who both now wore formal attire that shimmered in the light like living cloth. Jake, by contrast, wore his least stained jacket and a borrowed sash that Siluna claimed was ancient ceremonial garb, but suspiciously resembled a curtain tie. The greeting party was odd. A three-eyed, eel-skinned diplomat with an unnerving smile bowed low. Ah, the House of Linareth re-emerges, and with a human consort. He bowed to Jake, who bowed back with uncertain enthusiasm. Hi, Jake, occasional pilot. Full-time confused person. Ah, the eelman said, a pleasure. Behind him, a small jellyfish hovered in a water-filled drone casing. It gurgled, then translated. Your aura is bright, like fermented light honey. Jake opened his mouth. Closed it, thank you. Kalith handled most of the initial greetings with terrifying poise. Jake nodded at things, smiled awkwardly. At one point, a six-limbed creature offered him a drink that steamed upward instead of down. He pretended to sip and accidentally inhaled half of it. Later, in a borrowed diplomatic suite, Jake paced like a man preparing to be eaten. So, how'd I do? Admirably, Kalith said. Passably, Siluna corrected. I didn't die, so I'm calling it a win. Kalith crossed her arms. But it's not over. There's a meeting tonight, the 9 houses, you must be present. Jake groaned. I don't know how to be noble. You just have to act like one, Siluna said. Meaning, say very little, look mildly bored, and don't punch anyone even if they deserve it. Jake rubbed his temples. Are there going to be speeches? Yes. Long speeches? Yes. Do I get snacks? No, Caliph said. I take back my rescue. Siluna grinned. Too late, you're already in our court. Hours later in the Hall of Echoes, Siluna snorted, like a cargo pod on fire, but yes. Jake flopped onto a couch that tried to adjust to his shape and gave up halfway. So, do I have enemies now? Caliph looked at him seriously. You always had them. You just didn't know they had names. Cool, love that. Gonna sleep with a plasma wrench under my pillow. You already do, Marnie said from overhead. Jake sighed. This was easier when you two were unconscious. Everything was, Siluna said with a wink. But where's the fun in that? Jake was halfway through trying to reheat a suspiciously blue noodle dish when Siluna burst into the last chance's galley with the energy of a solar flare. Guess what? She said, grinning in a way that made Jake feel like he should immediately brace for impact. No, he said automatically. Caliph entered more quietly behind her, arms crossed, face unreadable. That was never a good sign. You haven't heard what it is yet, Siluna said. Jake pointed his fork at her. Does it involve plasma weapons, impersonating royalty, or me having to wear another sash that smells like dead flowers and political ambition? Siluna grinned wider. All of the above. Jake dropped his fork. Caliph stepped forward. The council has called a right of witness. Jake blinked. That sounds fancy. Is it bad that I want to run away screaming just from the name? It's a formal event, Caliph said. A declaration of intent. You stand before the 9 houses and affirm or deny your role as companion soul. Jake stared at her. Right. Right, because nothing says clarity like making cosmic life decisions in front of space royalty, who may or may not want to turn me into molecular pudding. It's tradition, Caliph said. So is tooth removal without anesthesia on certain outer rim mining worlds, Jake replied. Doesn't mean we should keep doing it. Siluna popped a blue noodle into her mouth and chewed thoughtfully. You're stalling. Of course I'm stalling, Jake snapped. I'm a human cargo hauler who likes quiet breakfasts and ships that don't talk back. I am deeply offended, Marnie said from the ceiling. I didn't mean you, Marnie. You're the only thing keeping me sane. Flattery detected, logging for later manipulation. Jake sighed and rubbed his temples. What happens if I say no, hypothetically? Caliph's gaze didn't waver. You leave, you are free. But the alliance collapses, our claim weakens, and the houses will move against us. Jake stood very still. And if I say yes, then you are ours publicly, irrevocably. You speak as our third, you gain status, power, enemies. Is that last one mandatory? Caliph hesitated. Yes. Jake slumped into a chair and stared at his reheated noodles like they might hold a hidden prophecy. How long do I have? Siluna tossed him a datapad. The rite starts in 6 hours. Jake choked. 6. 7 technically, Caliph said. But you'll need time to bathe and possibly rethink your entire personality. Perfect. Just enough time to panic in 5 different languages. Marnie made a soft beep. I've already prepared your ceremonial outfit. It includes pants with structural dignity. What does that even mean? You'll find out, Marnie said ominously. A few hours later, Jake stood in front of the mirror, staring at a version of himself he didn't recognize. The ceremonial attire was somehow both imposing and absurd. Flowing silver threads woven with subtle circuitry, sleeves that shimmered with embedded glyphs, and boots that made his ankles feel judged. This feels illegal, he muttered. Siluna adjusted his collar. You look good. I look like I'm about to narrate a prophecy while juggling fire orphans. That was actually last week's rite, she said. Caliph entered, dressed in a mantle that glowed faintly with what looked like a contained nebula. Are you ready? No. Excellent. The Hall of Witness was larger than any he'd seen. Columns of glass and light stretching into infinity, floor panels that shimmered underfoot, an air that tasted faintly of electricity and lemon. The 9 houses were seated in arcs of levitating thrones, arranged in deliberate, daunting symmetry. Caliph and Siluna stood to either side of Jake as he stepped into the center platform. A projection of the House of Linareth's emblem, an eclipse ringed in flame, glowed beneath his feet. A booming voice echoed through the chamber. "Declare." Jake took a breath. "My name is Jake Mercer. I am human. I rescued these 2 when their ships were down, and since then I've been dragged into interstellar politics, fancy dinners, and enough stress to turn my hair gray." He paused. "Also, I may or may not be bonding myself to alien nobility, but I'm still working through that emotionally." There was an awkward silence. "Do you accept the bond of Linareth?" the voice asked again. Jake glanced at Caliph. She looked at him like she always did, calm, steady, sharp as a knife. He looked at Siluna. She gave him a thumbs up and mouthed, "Don't screw this up." Jake looked out at the gathered houses. He saw suspicion, curiosity, mild contempt, and maybe, just maybe, a few threads of hope. "I don't know everything about your politics," Jake said, louder now. "I don't know every rule or every symbol, but I know this. When I found these 2 in a broken ship, I didn't hesitate. And if doing that makes me part of their house, then, yeah, I accept." Gasps, a few murmurs. One dignitary actually clapped before their neighbor elbowed them. Caliph stepped forward and touched Jake's arm with 2 fingers. "It is done," she said. Siluna pulled something from her belt, a small silver circlet, and placed it on Jake's head with exaggerated ceremony. "I now crown you, Duke of Dumb Luck." "I think I outrank you now," Jake muttered. "You'd have to survive longer than a week for that to matter," she whispered back. The rite concluded with surprising efficiency. A few formal gestures, a holographic seal, and suddenly Jake was officially part of one of the oldest houses in the galaxy. He expected applause, fireworks, maybe even a fruit basket. Instead, Caliph turned to him and said, "We have to leave immediately." Jake frowned. "Why?" "Because House Vyerma just issued a private challenge. They claim the rite was invalid. They're calling for trial by witness combat." Jake blinked. "That's not a thing." "It is now," Siluna said, already pulling on gloves. Marnie's voice cut through the intercom. "Incoming encrypted message. Hostile intent flagged. Also, someone hacked the ship's playlist. It's all dramatic music now." Jake groaned. "Can't I just enjoy my new title for like 5 minutes?" Caliph handed him a sword that glowed ominously. "No." Siluna tossed him a shield. "Try not to die, it's bad for morale." Jake strapped it on, muttering, "This is not how normal people spend their Tuesday nights." From the ship's speakers, dramatic opera resumed at full volume. Jake rolled his eyes. "Marnie." "Yes." "Turn it up." Jake blocked a glowing blade with a clumsy clang that reverberated down to his elbows. His shield, elegant and ceremonial, not at all built for actual combat, hummed angrily in his grip, protesting every strike like a unionized kitchen appliance. Across from him, the challenger from House Vyerma twirled a plasma spear with the ease of someone who had spent several centuries practicing in front of mirrors and fan clubs. She moved like water, graceful and smug. Her hair floated around her like it had its own gravitational field. Her armor sang every time she turned. Jake, meanwhile, was sweating inside a ceremonial tunic that kept trying to reconfigure its fabric mid-fight. "Marnie," he hissed through gritted teeth, ducking under a glowing arc of death, "can you maybe stop the tunic from folding itself into a toga every 10 seconds? Fashion protocol is auto-enabled during public duels." Marnie replied in her calm, indifferent tone. "I thought you wanted to appear regal." "Regal doesn't matter if I'm vaporized into stylish mist." Caliph and Siluna watched from the sidelines, technically not allowed to intervene, though Jake could see Siluna miming swordplay with the enthusiasm of a sports commentator. Caliph looked poised enough to file legal paperwork during the duel. "Less arms, more legs." Siluna yelled helpfully. Aim like you're throwing a sandwich at a bureaucrat. Jake didn't know what that meant, but in a surge of improvised instinct and dumb luck, he stumbled forward, tripped on his own reconfiguring hem, and accidentally tackled his opponent straight into the holographic floor. A long silence. The plasmasphere clattered across the floor. Jake blinked. Did I win? You body-checked a high matron of House Vierma, Caliph said. Didn't see that move in the combat manual, Siluna muttered. The matron sat up slowly, dazed, her armor cracked. I yield, she said, and I would also like a medic, possibly a therapist. Jake stood, panting, bruised, and increasingly annoyed at how his sash was now floating. So does this mean no one else wants to fight me? The presiding official, a crystalline entity wearing a hat for some reason, glowed pleasantly. The right has been defended. The bond is honored. House Linareth stands. Jake dropped his sword. Awesome, can I have lunch now? The following days blurred together in a surreal montage of political meetings, ceremonial hand-waving, and enough perfumed greetings to clog his sinuses for a decade. Every house sent delegates. Some congratulated him. Some glared. One offered him an exotic fruit that smelled like treason. Through it all, Caliph remained measured and analytical, guiding him through the labyrinthine rules of noble galactic politics with the same precision she applied to starship repair and interpersonal sarcasm. Siluna, on the other hand, insisted on training him, mostly by challenging him to duel with kitchen utensils and throwing surprise questions about alien etiquette over breakfast. You're adjusting, Caliph said one night after a particularly long council session. Am I? Jake asked, staring into a mug of something purple and allegedly tea. You didn't insult anyone's lineage today. I almost insulted someone's fashion lineage, Jake muttered. Progress, she said. He leaned back, watching the stars roll past outside the viewport. You know, I didn't think I'd end up here. Not in a political bond with two alien princesses. Not defending rights and waving to delegates. I thought I'd live out my life salvaging junk and occasionally talking to my coffee machine. You still talk to your coffee machine, Marnie said. Yeah, but now it has opinions. You're welcome, Marnie said smugly. Siluna dropped onto the couch beside him, legs folded under her like a lounging fox. You've changed. Jake raised an eyebrow, more royal. Less bitter, less running. Jake didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said, I used to think quiet meant safety. That being alone meant I couldn't mess anything up. But it turns out I'm really good at messing things up even with people around. Caliph smiled faintly. The galaxy rarely needs perfect people, it needs brave ones. He looked at them, at the sisters who had started as strangers and slowly become the gravitational center of his wildly redefined life. So what now? We travel, Siluna said. There's a meeting of Outer Rim trade alliances next month. Rumor says someone's using weaponized song beasts in negotiation. We investigate, Caliph added. The council will require representation. And you, she looked directly at him, are now a representative. Jake groaned. Do I have to wear the sash again? Only if you want Caliph to suffer, Siluna said. Then yes, absolutely. They laughed quietly at first. The kind of laughter that comes after long tension, after battles and rituals and too many things left unspoken. It filled the quiet of the ship like warmth. Later that night, when Jake stood alone on the observation deck, the stars unspooling endlessly beyond the hull, he tapped the console and spoke softly. Marnie. Yes, Jake. You think I made the right choice? The AI paused. I calculate that had you returned to your former route, you would currently be eating expired rations in a vacuum-leaky orbit near a collapsed mining colony. That's a yes then. Statistically, yes,